How do I tell if my CO2 tank is a siphon tube CO2 tank or a regular CO2 tank? Well, first and foremost, you need to be safe. Regardless of what you do and how you do it, you need to make sure that you have control of the CO2 tank at all times. This is super important. You may not think it is, but it's extremely important. And somebody, i.e. you or somebody else, could get killed if you don't do this correctly. So major advisory there. So how do you tell? Well, here's the difference, and here's a couple of background pieces of information to be able to help you in determining whether you have a siphon tube tank or a regular CO2 tank. Now, generally and straightforward, the neck is going to be labeled. There's either going to be a stamp on the neck of the tank or something written on the valve or a stamp on the valve. Now, what that means, DT may be written on it, dip tube. ST may be stamped in it or written on it, siphon tube. You might have a little green sticker that says adductor tube. That means adductor tube is a siphon tube, a dip tube, okay? There may be some other markings with white or something else, but it's going to generally say ST, DT, ET, or actually the word itself, okay? Written and or stamped somewhere on the tank. If it's not and you still can't determine it, most likely it will not be a siphon tube tank. Now, if you still don't know, but maybe you got a siphon tube tank and you can't figure it out, if it's full, you have a siphon tube and a regular tank, you are able to tell the difference. Now, the thing here is this, what really matters is where you are located. More importantly, and I say this in layman's terms, where you're located, because actually the more in-depth explanation is the temperature and the humidity. If you're in Vegas, when you shoot out CO2 from a regular tank and you shoot out CO2 from a siphon tube tank, you're not really going to be able to tell the difference, okay? You will, because the siphon tube will always have more white coming out than the regular one. Now, it may not be as abundant and it may not be as apparent in Vegas where it's hot and no humidity, or Arizona, hot, no humidity, as it would be in, like, say, Florida or in Washington or in San Diego. In one of those areas, high humidity, temperatures in the medians, okay, 70s, 80s, well, guess what? You can definitely tell a difference. Now, this is if it is a full tank, because what happens is if a siphon tube tank gets past the point where the liquid has converted the gas inside, and that siphon tube is not sucking up any more liquid because the tank's almost empty for special effects purposes because there's no more liquid in it, well, guess what? That's going to look the same as the gas tank because it's still under pressure. You still have CO2 in it. The liquid burned off in the gas because it's almost empty for special effects purposes, and now you're just blowing gas out, but indeed it's a siphon tank. So the major concept here to understand is you got to have full tanks when you're testing this out, okay? Now, the other option that people have done, we do not recommend this, okay, is actually taking the tank and laying the tank on the side, strapping it down, maybe with the bottom a little bit elevated, and they open the valve. Again, we do not recommend this. We recommend professionals handle this, because if that tank goes awry and that valve gets knocked off, you are in serious trouble. That tank could shoot up 100 feet in the air, and I'm talking a steel tank that weighs 150 pounds. So imagine a smaller tank that weighs less than that. It's taking people's legs off. Yes, it's very serious, and I know I'm harping on this because I want you to be safe. Again, we only are reporting here what customers have informed us how to tell. We do not recommend that. We recommend getting the tanks full and finding out that way, or taking them to a professional where they can take the valve off. They can take the valve off and see if there's a siphon tube in it or not, and then they can put it back on. You do not take the valve off, because if so, there's major repercussions that could happen, especially if it's under pressure, if it's not sealed right. Again, this is regulated by the Department of Transportation as well as some other federal agencies, and safety is a must here. I can't harp on that enough. So those are the ways to tell if you have a siphon tube tank, CO2 siphon tube tank, or a regular CO2 tank. Do not tip them upside down. Do not tip them on their sides. Those are just some of the ways. Get them full, shoot them out, take a video if you need to, so you can go back and go, wait a minute, that tank looks like it shoots out a little bit more than the others. Now, let me preface this and say that sometimes the siphon tube can break off inside the tank. So if you rattle your tank around, then guess what? You're gonna hear the siphon tube ding, 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 and banging around in the tank. If you don't hear that, well, then there's no siphon tube in the tank, or there's a siphon tube in the tank and it's still attached. So you kind of see where I'm going with this. Always seek the professionals. Make sure you contact us or one of the gas companies that's out there that can help with that. But more importantly, if you have two tanks and you can compare them side by side, this is how you would do it. That's how you can tell if you have a CO2 siphon tank or not. All tanks should and most likely will be marked. Again, ST, DT, ET, not extraterrestrial, adductor tube, and of course some type of marking on the top or on the valve itself. Sometimes those markings might be under a sticker and therefore you have to peel the sticker back to look. Do not do that. Have one of the gas companies do that, because you can get into some issues with the sticker being ripped off and then maybe they don't take the tank, okay? Just as a heads up there, we have other videos that show what the markings mean on the tank, and we go in depth on this as well. That's how you tell if you have a siphon tube CO2 tank or a regular CO2 tank. Thanks for watching.